My phone rang at exactly 2:14 in the morning. I remember the time because I was still awake, going over deployment paperwork on my laptop, half a cup of cold coffee sitting next to me. When your phone rings that late, your heart already knows something is wrong before your brain catches up. It was my mother. "Kendall," she said, not even a hello. "Tomorrow night, you're going to dinner with your brother's fiancé's family." I sat up straighter. "Okay. Why are you calling me at 2 a.m. to tell me about dinner?" "Because I need you to understand something first," she said, and her voice had that tone, the one she used when she was about to ask me to shrink myself for someone else's comfort. Her father is a colonel. A decorated one. Very respected. This dinner matters to your brother's future with this family. So tomorrow you go, you smile, you eat, and you keep your mouth shut. I let the silence sit for a second. Keep my mouth shut about what?
About your job.
About the military. About all of it, she said. I don't want you showing up talking about ranks and deployments and making it about you. This is your brother's night. Don't embarrass us. There it was. Don't embarrass us. I want you to understand something about my family before I go further. I am a U.S. Army officer. I have served for over 12 years. I have led soldiers in places I can't fully talk about. I have earned medals I don't wear unless I have to, and I have given more of my life to this country than most people will ever understand. But in my own family, none of that mattered. To my mother, my career was something to be managed, hidden, smoothed over, like a stain you cover with a tablecloth before guests arrive. My younger brother, Tyler, was the golden child. Charming, easygoing, the kind of person people liked instantly. He had recently gotten engaged to a woman named Vanessa, whose family came from money, status, and military pedigree. Her father, Colonel Marcus Hale, was apparently a name people said with a little bow in their voice. And my mother's solution to all of this? Erase me for one night, so I wouldn't compete with the image she wanted to present. Got it, I said quietly. Good. Just be normal, Kendall. Please. I hung up the phone and sat there in the dark for a long moment. Not crying. Not angry, not yet. Just still. The kind of stillness that comes right before something inside you decides it's done being small. I smiled to myself in the dark. Got it, I whispered again, but this time, it meant something very different than what my mother thought. Because here's the thing nobody in my family ever bothered to ask. What exactly do I do? What is my actual title? They knew I was in the army. They knew I worked at a base. That's it. That's the depth of their curiosity about the thing I had sacrificed birthdays, relationships, holidays, and pieces of myself for. If my mother had asked even one real question over the years, she would have known that the name Colonel Marcus Hale was not unfamiliar to me at all. But she never asked, so she had no idea what was about to walk into that dining room the next night. Section 2. The dinner nobody wanted me at. The next evening, I stood outside the Hale family's house in my simplest clothes, slacks, a plain blouse, flats. No insignia, no rank, nothing that would tell a stranger what I did for a living. My mother had specifically asked me to dress normal, and I complied, because I wasn't there to perform. I was there to observe. The house was beautiful, the kind of home that whispers money quietly instead of shouting it. Chandeliers, dark wood floors, the smell of roasted something coming from the kitchen. My brother Tyler greeted me at the door with a nervous hug.
Hey, sis.
Thanks for coming. Just, keep it light tonight, okay? Even my brother was in on it.
Light.
Got it, I said and walked in. Vanessa was lovely, genuinely. Warm smile, polite, clearly nervous about making a good impression of her own. Her mother fluttered around offering drinks. And then there was the colonel. Marcus Hale was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that comes from 30 years of standing at attention, even when no one is watching. Gray at the temples, sharp eyes, the air of a man used to being the most important person in any room he entered. My mother introduced me as simply, "This is my daughter, Kendall. She works for the government." Works for the government. That's what 12 years of service had been reduced to. The colonel shook my hand politely, glanced at me for half a second longer than necessary, and moved on to greet the next guest. I felt my mother visibly relax. Dinner began. The conversation flowed exactly the way my mother had planned it. Tyler's job in finance, Vanessa's upcoming wedding plans, the Colonel's stories about his decades of service, told with the practiced rhythm of a man who had told them many times before at many dinners, to many impressed faces. Every time the topic accidentally drifted toward me, "And what is it you do again, Kendall?" my mother would smoothly redirect it. "Oh, just office work. Nothing as exciting as the Colonel's career." I sat there, eating quietly, watching my own life get erased course by course. I won't lie to you. It stung. Not because I needed praise. I have never needed anyone's applause for what I do. But there is a specific kind of pain in sitting at a table with the people who are supposed to know you best, and watching them describe you as nothing, just to make someone else comfortable. Then dessert came out, and the Colonel, mid-story about a training exercise overseas, suddenly paused. He looked at me again, really looked this time, like a man trying to place a song he hadn't heard in years. The table went quiet for a second, waiting for him to continue his story. He didn't continue. Instead, he set down his fork, looked directly at me, and said the words that would change the entire night. "I'm sorry, forgive me for asking this so directly. But are you the Kendall Reyes who led the Falcon Ridge extraction in 2019? My mother's smile froze on her face like a photograph. Section 3. The question that broke the silence. For a moment, nobody at that table moved. My mother's fork hovered halfway to her mouth. Tyler's eyes darted between me and the Colonel like he was watching a car accident happen in slow motion. Vanessa looked confused, glancing at her father, then at me, then back at her father. I set my napkin down calmly. "Yes, sir. That was me." The Colonel's whole posture shifted. He sat up even straighter, if that was possible, and there was something in his face now that hadn't been there a moment ago. Respect. Real, immediate, unmistakable respect. "I was the regional liaison during that operation," he said. "I read the after-action report. What you and your team pulled off that night, getting 11 people out under those conditions with the intel window you had, that wasn't just good work. That was some of the best small unit leadership I've seen documented in my entire career." My mother let out a small, strange laugh, the kind people make when they're trying to fill a silence they don't understand. "Oh, Kendall does paperwork mostly, I think. Office things." The Colonel turned to her, and his expression made it clear he was no longer being polite. He was being precise. "Ma'am, with respect, your daughter is not doing paperwork. Captain Reyes was awarded the Bronze Star for that operation. She has run logistics for joint task forces that most officers twice her age never get assigned to. I've had her name brought up in briefings I sat in on at the Pentagon." The room fell dead silent. I watched my mother's face go through about 4 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds: confusion, denial, embarrassment, and finally, something that looked almost like fear. Fear of being caught. Because that's what this was. She had been caught. Tyler stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Wait, Bronze Star? Sis, you never said." "I was told not to talk about my job tonight," I said simply, looking right at my mother. "So I didn't." The Colonel looked between my mother and me, and I could see him slowly understanding exactly what kind of office work excuse he had just walked into. His jaw tightened. "Mrs. Reyes," he said slowly, carefully, "did you ask your daughter to hide this from us?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't want her to make the night about her. This is Tyler and Vanessa's night. By telling her not to mention that she's a decorated Army captain, the Colonel asked, and his voice had gone quiet in that dangerous way certain men's voices go quiet. Not loud, not angry-sounding, but absolutely unmistakable in its disapproval. "Ma'am, I have sat across from generals. I have briefed senators. And I am telling you right now, what your daughter has done in service to this country is not something to be ashamed of or hidden at a dinner table. It is something to be proud of." I felt something crack open in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something closer to relief. The relief of finally being seen by someone, even if that someone was a stranger and not my own mother. But my mother wasn't done digging her hole. "I just thought," she said, her voice rising slightly, defensive now, "that it would be better if tonight was simple. Kendall she's always been the serious one. The complicated one. I didn't want to confuse Vanessa's family. And there it was. The real reason. Not protecting Tyler's night. Protecting her own comfort. Because my entire life, I had been the complicated one simply for being good at something my family didn't understand and never bothered to ask about. The Colonel looked at me, then at my mother, and said something I will never forget. "Ma'am, I think the only person who should have been embarrassed tonight was you." What my mother never knew. Let me take you back just for a moment so you understand exactly how deep this betrayal went, because it didn't start that night. It started years earlier. When I first told my mother I was joining the army instead of going to law school like she'd planned for me, she didn't speak to me for nearly 3 weeks. When I graduated officer training, she didn't come. She said the timing didn't work. When I came home from my first deployment, there was no welcome party, no balloons, no pride. Just a quiet dinner where she asked when I was going to settle down and get a real career. Every promotion, every award, every milestone, I learned to stop telling her because her reaction was always some version of indifference, or worse, mild embarrassment, like my uniform was something slightly inconvenient to explain to her friends at church. Meanwhile, Tyler's every small achievement, a promotion at his finance job, a new car, a vacation photo, was celebrated like a parade. I'm not bitter about my brother. He never asked for that imbalance, and he's never been cruel to me. But my mother built an entire emotional economy in our family where my accomplishments were currency she refused to spend, while his were currency she displayed proudly on the mantle. So when she called me at 2 a.m. and told me to keep my mouth shut about my own life, it wasn't a new wound. It was the same old wound, reopened one more time, except this time, it happened in front of strangers who actually understood what 12 years of service meant. That's why the Colonel's words hit different. He wasn't telling me anything I needed to hear for my own ego. I already knew what I had accomplished. I didn't need a stranger's validation. What I needed, what finally happened that night, was for my mother to be unable to hide the truth anymore. For the curtain she'd kept drawn over my entire career to finally, publicly, undeniably fall. I hadn't planned any of this, by the way. I want to be honest with you. I didn't walk into that dinner with some calculated revenge plan. I wasn't there to expose anyone. I genuinely intended to sit quietly, eat my food, and go home, exactly as instructed. The only reason the truth came out is because the universe has a strange sense of justice sometimes, because the one man at that table who actually had the knowledge and the standing to recognize my work was sitting 3 seats away from the woman who had spent years pretending it didn't exist. I didn't create that moment. I just stopped helping my mother hide from it. The aftermath at the table. After the Colonel's comment, "The only person who should have been embarrassed tonight was you," the dinner table fell into a heavy, uncomfortable quiet. Vanessa's mother shifted in her seat. Vanessa herself looked at me with something like awe now, completely reevaluating who I was. "Captain Reyes," she said softly, "I had no idea. That's incredible." "Please call me Kendall," I said. My mother, visibly shaken, tried one more time to smooth things over. "Well, I just think family business is family business, and—" "Mom," Tyler interrupted, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard him use with her before. "She has a Bronze Star. You told her not to mention her job like it was something to be ashamed of." "I didn't say ashamed," my mother snapped, her composure finally cracking. "I said don't make it about you." "She didn't make it about her," Tyler said. "She sat here and let you erase her for 2 hours. That's not the same thing." I watched my little brother, the golden child, the easy one, the one who never had to fight for attention in our house, defend me for what felt like the first time in our adult lives. Something in me softened toward him in that moment, even amid everything else happening. The Colonel, meanwhile, had pulled out his phone. "Captain Reyes, I have to ask, are you still active? I'd like to follow up properly outside of dinner, if that's all right. People like you don't get talked about enough, and frankly, I think that needs to change." "I'd like that, sir," I said. My mother sat there, smaller than I had ever seen her, picking at her food, saying nothing. For the first time in my life, I watched her face the consequence of choosing image over truth, comfort over respect, appearances over her own daughter. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to say, "I told you so," or twist the knife further. The colonel had already said everything that needed saying, and saying it himself, unprompted, carried far more weight than anything I could have argued on my own behalf. Dinner ended not long after. Polite goodbyes were exchanged. Vanessa hugged me at the door and quietly said, "I'm really glad I know the real you now." Tyler walked me to my car. "I'm sorry, sis," he said. "I didn't know how bad it actually was. I thought Mom was just being Mom. I didn't realize she was asking you to disappear." "She's been asking me to disappear my whole life, Tyler," I said. Tonight was just the first time someone refused to let it happen. He didn't have a response to that. He just hugged me, longer than usual, and said he'd call me during the week. I drove home that night with the windows down, cold air on my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Section 6. The conversation my mother didn't expect. 3 days later, my mother called me again. Not at 2 a.m. this time, a normal Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Kendall," she said, her voice careful, rehearsed. "I think we need to talk about the dinner." "Okay," I said. "I'm listening." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering whatever she had planned to say. "I was wrong," she finally said. "What I did, asking you to hide who you are, that was wrong. I've thought about it for 3 days, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I was so worried about how things looked to other people that I forgot what I was actually asking of you. I was asking my own daughter to make herself smaller so a stranger's family would be comfortable." I didn't say anything right away. I let her sit in it. "I think," she continued, her voice cracking slightly, "I've been doing that to you for a long time."
Not just that night.
For years. I told myself I was being practical, keeping the peace, not stirring things up. But really, I think I just never knew how to be proud of something I didn't fully understand. Your career scared me, Kendall. The risk of it. The thought of something happening to you. So instead of asking questions and learning about your world, I just avoided it. And avoiding it became easier than facing how proud I actually was underneath all that fear. It was the most honest thing my mother had said to me in maybe a decade. "Why didn't you ever ask me about my work?" I asked quietly. "Just once. In 12 years. "Because I was afraid of what I'd hear," she admitted. "I was afraid you'd tell me something dangerous, something that would keep me up at night picturing you in danger."
So, I just didn't ask.
I told myself ignorance was easier. But Kendall, I see now that what I actually did was make you feel like your life's work was something to be embarrassed about. And that was never true. I was the one who should have been embarrassed. Colonel Hale was right. I felt tears come to my eyes, unexpected, sudden. Not from sadness exactly, but from 12 years of carrying something finally being acknowledged. "I needed you to ask me about my life, Mom," I said. "Not to be impressed by it. Just to ask." "I know," she said. "I'm asking now. Tell me everything. I want to actually know my daughter." We talked for almost 2 hours that day. I told her about Falcon Ridge, about the soldiers I'd led, about the fear and the responsibility, and the moments that still visit me sometimes at night. She listened, really listened, asking questions, crying at some parts, going quiet at others. It wasn't a magical fix to years of damage. But it was a beginning, a real one, built on truth instead of comfortable silence. About 2 weeks after the dinner, I got a call from Colonel Hale directly. True to his word, he followed up. "Captain Reyes," he said, "I've been talking to some colleagues. There's an upcoming leadership panel for young officers, and your name kept coming up before I even mentioned I knew you personally. I'd like to nominate you to speak if you're willing." I was stunned. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit for something like that." "With respect, Captain," he said, "I've sat through dozens of these panels. Most of them feature people reciting accomplishments. What I want is someone who can speak honestly about the cost of service, the parts nobody claps for. I think you're exactly the right fit." I accepted. A month later, I stood in front of a room of young officers and told them, honestly, about Falcon Ridge, the fear before the mission, the decisions made in seconds that could never be unmade, the weight of bringing 11 people home safely, and the strange, quiet loneliness of coming home to a family who never asked about any of it. I didn't mention my mother by name. But I talked about the importance of being seen by the people who matter to you, and how sometimes you have to learn to see yourself first, with or without anyone else's permission. My mother was in that audience. She had asked to come. Afterward, she hugged me in front of everyone, no longer caring about appearances, no longer managing the image of things. Just my mother, finally proud, finally present, finally asking instead of avoiding. Section 8. The wedding reframed. Tyler and Vanessa's wedding happened 6 months later. This time, there was no whispered instruction to keep quiet, no careful redirection at the reception. When the toasts began, my mother stood up, something she had never done at a family event before regarding me, and asked to say something. "I want to take a moment," she said, her voice steady but emotional, "to recognize someone who has given more to this country and to this family than I ever properly acknowledged. My daughter, Captain Kendall Reyes, has served for 12 years with a level of courage and sacrifice most of us will never fully understand. I am deeply, deeply proud of her. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud." The room applauded. Colonel Hale, sitting at the head table as Vanessa's father, caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, knowing nod, the kind one professional gives another, acknowledging a battle quietly won. I didn't need that applause to know my own worth. I had known it for years, carried it through deployments and difficult nights and decisions no toast could ever capture. But I won't pretend it didn't feel good, really deeply good, to finally hear my own mother say it out loud, in front of everyone, without shame, without managing the narrative, without asking me to disappear. Section 9. The reflection. Here's what I learned from that one dinner, that one accidental, unplanned moment of truth. Sometimes the people closest to us don't betray us with cruelty. They betray us with silence, with small instructions to keep it light, to not make it about you, to just be normal. Those requests sound harmless on the surface, but underneath them is often a quiet message. Who you really are is inconvenient, and I need you to hide it for my comfort. I didn't seek revenge that night. I didn't plan exposure or plot a confrontation. I simply stopped covering for someone else's comfort at the cost of my own truth. And it turned out the truth didn't need my help to come out. It just needed a moment, and someone willing to recognize it. If there's one thing I'd want anyone watching this to take away, it's this. You are not required to shrink yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Not at a dinner table, not in your own family, not anywhere. The people who truly love you will eventually have to face the full truth of who you are, and if it takes them years to get there, that delay was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of their fear, their image management, their own unfinished work. My mother and I are not perfect now. We still have hard conversations. There are still moments where old habits try to creep back in. But there is something different between us now, an honesty that wasn't there before, built from a single dinner where the truth simply refused to stay quiet any longer. And as for Colonel Hale, he didn't just recognize my service that night. In a strange, unexpected way, he gave my mother and me back to each other, simply by refusing to let a lie sit comfortably at his table. Sometimes the people who change your life the most are the ones who simply ask one honest question at exactly the right moment and refuse to look away from the answer. If this story moved you, or reminded you of someone in your own life who deserves to be seen for who they really are, let me know in the comments. And if you believe that the truth always finds its way to the table, eventually, subscribe and stay for the next story. Because sometimes the loudest justice comes from the quietest silence finally being broken.